The Crooked Anchor and the Dynamite Disaster. It was event night at the Crooked Anchor, a phrase that carried about as much excitement in Lower Taddlecombe as bin collection or mild gout. David had been very excited all week. He'd booked a stand-up comedian from Exeter, Ricky Tinsel, a man who performed under the delusion that energy and volume could compensate for a total absence of humour. Unfortunately, David had also forgotten to do one very important thing: tell anyone. "Flyers," he muttered behind the bar, face in his hands. I knew I was forgetting something. I had them all printed and everything, left them in the boot of my car under the tarpaulin and the emergency wellies. Now, inside the pub, the audience consisted of exactly 3 people. David, sweating with guilt and desperate optimism. Brian, looking like he'd rather be locked in a bin. Pete, unmoving in his corner seat, pint untouched as always. The comedian, already on stage, by which we mean standing in front of the cardboard fireplace, adjusted the mic on the creaky stand that wasn't plugged into anything. "Good evening, the Crooked Anchor. Great to be here, though I did almost miss the place. I thought it was a shed with opinions." David laughed nervously. Brian grunted. Pete stared out the window. The jokes went downhill from there. Faster than gravity should allow. There were gags about tractor dating apps, sheep therapists, and a long, meandering story about a bad curry in Barnstaple. Brian winced audibly. He's weaponized silence. David, committed to optimism to the bitter end, clapped politely after each joke like a man trying to restart a dying engine. Then something very unexpected happened. Pete, silent, immovable, utterly neutral Pete, let out a wheezing, uncontrollable laugh. Everyone turned. He was still staring out the window. Did Pete just laugh? David whispered. "Was it at the joke?" Brian asked. Pete burst out again, a proper belly laugh now, shoulders shaking. The comedian blinked, surprised. "See? Someone gets it." But Pete wasn't looking at the comedian. He was still gazing through the smudged glass at something outside, a pair of cows trying to mount a wheelie bin in what looked like a 3-part dance routine. "I think he's watching nature do comedy better," Brian muttered. Meanwhile, from the kitchen came a terrifyingly loud bang. Clifford emerged, flour-dusted and wild-eyed, pushing a trolley the size of a piano. Upon it sat an enormous, wobbling soufflé, glowing faintly, like a beacon for bad decisions. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's special, I give you the Dynamite soufflé!" It jiggled threateningly. "What's in it?" David asked, already worried. Clifford beamed. "A mix of egg whites, rhubarb, fermented mustard gas, and just a hint of hedgerow rocket. Locally foraged." Brian stood up. "I'm going to leave. If that thing achieves sentience, I want a head start." Pete, still laughing to himself, gave a small hiccup and wiped his eyes. The comedian wrapped up with an off-key limerick about turnip farmers and a donkey, and David applauded valiantly, if only to signal the end. "Thanks, Lower Twaddlecombe," the comedian shouted. "Taddlecombe?" muttered Brian. David patted him on the back on his way out. "You were certainly present." When the pub fell quiet again, the soufflé made a faint trembling sound, as if it resented its own existence. Clifford stood beside it proudly, waiting for applause. None came. "Well," David sighed, "at least Pete enjoyed himself." Pete smiled softly and raised his pint. And from the kitchen the soufflé began to rise again, slightly taller now, slightly angrier. But that was a problem for tomorrow.